Hey everybody, welcome back to Minkyu and Shiyoon, our podcast. We're excited for this one. This is just going to be me and Minkyu actually, and we're going to be talking about some of the topics that we might not have been able to really dive into in the first episode.
Yeah, we had some topics that we just wanted to dive into. Thankfully, our producer Andy has provided us with a list of topics, so thank you, Andy. But
You're welcome.
I guess we can start with how have you been, Shiyoon?
I've been good.
How has been life?
I think I was talking a little bit about it before, but I just downloaded Social Network on iTunes, and I do this thing now where I just like if it gets slightly boring, I just skip that part.
Yeah, I know. I think these new devices and the new way we view films are kind of conditioning our viewing experience kind of if it's shaping our viewing experience in a certain way.
I have like zero tolerance for like anything that's boring.
Yeah.
Especially on Netflix if I'm watching a movie.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, I'm giving this movie a chance, but then when I'm just like maybe 0.01 disappointed with it.
Are you watching it while you're working too, or is it just you're sitting on a couch and you're just watching?
I think, when I'm at home, when I have just like free time, I'm like, maybe I could watch a movie right now, and then maybe I could watch a fun movie, and there's this whole thought process of like leading up to, okay, what movie? And then finally I'm watching the movie, and it's just like slightly off. That would be a great movie. There's this great movie. Like sci-fi, there's a lot of sci-fi movies that the concept is like really interesting to me, but because it's sci-fi, maybe they don't have the best actors, and I was actually watching that thing that Carrie suggested, The Expanse, that first episode, just couldn't get into it. I don't know. I mean, maybe I just need to invest more time into it, but the actors are just so cringy. It's just like,
that's the hard thing with pilot episodes, right? Like, it's especially these days, like most 90% of shows you have to, it seems like you have to give a chance of giving it at least like 4 or 5 episodes into it. I actually, honest confession, please don't hate me for this, that was a little bit of my experience with the new Netflix Dark Crystal.
Oh,
Did any of you guys watch it?
It was one of those experiences where I was like, okay, okay, this part's really, really hard to just watch through, so I'm just skipping it. So I think what got me too was just like,
wait, are we talking about Dark Crystal?
Yeah, Dark Crystal.
So,
the acting. I mean, a lot of people are saying, "Oh, like, yeah, it's cool. It's like a puppet.
Yeah.
You get all these great performances in it." And then, I don't know. For me, it just felt like the acting just wasn't that interesting. And then maybe it was just because it was like the same facial expression and just a puppet just opening its mouth and closing it.
Yeah.
I was just like, it's just taking itself so seriously.
Yeah.
And it has its own like little world building thing.
Did you see the original?
No, I haven't watched it for in a while. Like I watched it a long time ago. Yeah.
Because the original is from start to finish just so mesmerizing.
Oh,
like it's just so captivating start to finish. And I'm a huge fan of the original. And I watched it a long time ago, and then recently, a few months before this new episode, this new season or this new series was released, I got to watch it again, and I was captivated the whole time.
Oh, okay.
But and I was really excited for this new season 2. But the original point that I wanted to make too was that it took me a little bit because of those things that you mentioned. Like, it doesn't completely feel like the original. Like, obviously, because of the update in technology, the cinematography feels different. Even the art direction feels different because the lighting and even the fact that it's all shot digitally compared to the original one having that like kind of a mysterious musky film grain and the fact that like, because even if you watch the first one, like as the narration begins and you see that castle, the Skeksis castle, and you see like the clouds above it.
Right.
You just go like, how did they do those clouds? Like, it's so incredible.
Right.
And is that not computer generated? Like, it's from the beginning, it's just you're transported. But I will say, like, I stuck with it. Like, I kind of charged through the first, I would say 4 or 5 episodes.
Wow.
And I think it was a 10 episode series because I really wanted to support it. Like, I just wanted more of these daring, like, you don't quite know if it's for children or if it's for families or if it's for adults. Like, I just want those shows to do well.
Right.
I will say that, like, towards the end of the season, like, emotionally it did pay off for me. Like, emotionally there was enough for me to be, like, satisfied with, of being invested and taken kind of on that roller coaster a little bit. But yeah, so this is our 4th episode, and it's been interesting looking back at the past 3 episodes and the guests that we've had and just the feedback that we've received. And one of the interesting things for me, I'm curious to hear your experience too, Shiyoon, but is that all of our friends, our close friends who know us, who listen to the podcast, their feedback was, I thought it was going to be a lot spicier. Which is really, I was like, wow, I guess now I know how you view me. But
so who are these specific people?
Well, I mean, specifically our past 2 guests, Helen and Carrie. The moment they arrived, I remember to record the podcast. Carrie was like, "Make it spicy."
Oh yeah.
And even my good friend Vicky, she was like, "I listened to it. I thought it was going to be a lot spicier than it ended up being." And Bobby Pontius.
Yeah.
He actually messaged me on Facebook, and he was saying, like, I can't wait to listen to the podcast. I know it's going to be spicy. And he actually said, like, I remember, I think when he was an apprentice at Disney, he was like, I would be walking up to the 3rd floor. So at Disney, the 3rd floor is where Viz Dev sits. The 2nd floor is where production and animation sits. And he said, I would be walking up the stairs, and I could hear you guys arguing really loud.
Really?
And I was like, really? Me and Shiyoon? And he'd be like, yeah. And I was like, we were arguing? And he was like, it definitely sounded like you guys were having a heated debate. and I was after that, I was like, and I tried to remember what we were arguing or debating about. And I couldn't remember anything, but the one incident that I can remember, that I wouldn't say it was an argument, but maybe it was like a heated discussion, it was right after Glenn stepped out of being director for Rapunzel, and then Rapunzel was being revamped as Tangled, and they kind of reintroduced a new male lead character for Rapunzel. And I remember at that time just hearing the concept and all of that, like, I did not like who he was, he ended up being Flynn Rider, and I remember just being like, I don't know about this Flynn Rider character. And I think part of it was because I was
defending it.
Well, yeah, no, you weren't defending it, but you were kind of saying, like, no, I could see how this could work. Like, I remember you saying, like, Rapunzel's character is like this kind of, she's sweet, she's very naive, she doesn't know the world, and then to match her with this kind of very, like, street smart, like, trickster, like, world weary, kind of almost jaded character, you were like, no, that could work. And I think I was just missing Bastion, who was the male lead for Glenn's, because I really like that story.
For people that don't know, that went through so many iterations, that movie, but I thought it was pretty incredible, like the version that you're talking about now.
Yeah, I think a lot of people do know about it now, which I think we can. This is the reason why we can talk about it, maybe, because like I think it was in the art of book and everything. So I feel comfortable talking about this now. But
the screening was pretty incredible. I mean, that it was just like such a different story.
Yeah, and I remember at that time a lot of us younger guys at Disney, kind of like the newer wave of people who just had gotten hired, saw the Rapunzel when Glenn was directing it, that version of the screening, and we all were just so excited, like, this is the future of animation.
Yeah, they could have just made that.
But I think, to the credit of Tangled and what it ended up being, maybe that's just what the movie had to be in the end. I don't know, which opens up a really interesting discussion about basically hypotheticals of like what would have happened if this version of the movie was made as opposed to like that version of the movie was made. Like would it have done better or would it have done worse? It's just interesting things that in animation we always think about, but in the end we'll never have answers to, because we only live in one reality.
I just think that spicy comment is really interesting because it's like, that's not that spicy to me. Like,
yeah. Well, I think our friends were maybe talking about like some other comments.
I do think because we were both at Disney, and I think, well, for me, I can only speak for myself. I was very like idealistic.
Oh, me too. Yeah.
I was just like, well, Disney means quality, and like,
yeah, Disney means innovation. Disney means experimentation. Disney means pushing the boundaries.
And so maybe it was like, I don't remember the specific topics, but I do like remember being like, why aren't we doing more, like better, like why, I just felt like we weren't doing enough. I remember that time. I was just like, I just want to get better. I feel like we need to get stories that are better. I feel like that was a good. That time when we were there, it was actually right when a lot of, like when we came in, that Disney wasn't doing that well. Like I think.
And we were in our mid-20s, so we were very, very young. Very like head full of idealism. Definitely like. Yeah, probably during those lunch conversations, there were probably a lot of spicy debates amongst all of us, because we were like, this is what it should be, that's what it should be. And, in the end, it's like, I think, what can you say? It's like Disney is what it is, and they have an identity. And I think that's one of the more like interesting lessons that you learn as you grow, is like you start your idea of like, where's my creative home and what do I want to do creatively? Like that starts kind of developing and evolving, and you grow as a person. And but we'll try to make it spicier. We just want to ease everybody in.
We'll crank it up. We'll ramp it up. Don't worry, guys.
But I guess that leads to one of the questions that I wanted to ask you, Shiyoon, was, that was then and now is now. And, as it was back then, now we're also still constantly evolving and rethinking ourselves as artists and expanding out of our artistic world. And in that vein, do you have any recent, I'd say, like revelations or themes in your artistic life that you're grappling with or learning, or any realizations that you came with?
I guess I saw on Twitter there's this we talked about it before, but there's this these images that this AI kind of drew, like based off looking at chickens and a whole bunch of chickens.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, I retweet. I think we both tweeted it, right?
Yeah.
So if you guys want to know what it's about, check out our Twitters.
And for me, for the longest time, I hate. There's this kind of attitude of making art that's more algorithmic and a better. And I've always felt like I was kind of against that. It's like kind of a love-hate thing, because I find myself doing the same thing too. When I'm looking at things that I really like, I tend to want to see some kind of pattern in all of it, and there's this kind of like mystical thing where it's like, well, if I just understand this common
I know that is so often that is so often how we approach like learning something too. I remember that's even in like the most basic rudimentary sense, that's how I felt when I first started going to Cal Arts.
Right.
And no matter how much I tried, I couldn't get the level of animation that I was trying to achieve. And so whenever you'd see like and this was when I was freshman, and when you're a freshman, you're barely starting to understand the concept of spacing and charts and like easing in. These concepts are so new to you that you're slowly digesting it, and then like an incredible legendary animator like James Baxter comes in to give a lecture on animation, and you're just like constantly like trying to soak in every move that he's making. Yeah. And I remember just thinking like, okay, if I just like record this in my brain, like maybe I'll get somewhere close to the type of animation that he's doing. And at that time when when the concept of charts hadn't fully like been learned by my brain inside me, like I remember him just like using charts one after another and being like, that's the secret. That's the one like key to unlock that type of animation. And of course, like after you learn charts, you're like, oh, that wasn't it. It was helpful.
No, right.
But there are so many more things. But no, I totally get what you mean.
And I think it's just like when I think about it, a lot of people we're constantly wanting some kind of pattern and I feel like
or like equation too, right?
Equation,
like they're kind of approaching art education like math education, wouldn't you say? Where it's like, oh, if I just learn, this equation or
no, no, totally. And right now I'm trying to go through this. I'm at this moment in my life where I'm like, what part of the process do I enjoy? Like, maybe I could like make a career out of that thing.
Yeah. Interesting.
And I really like. Well, I'm actually learning ZBrush just to be more self-aware of the tools.
Is that the Instagram post that you posted with the wire sculpture like? That was incredible. So check out his Instagram.
I'm still trying to figure it out. But what I liked about I've been like kind of trying to learn that, and then but when I'm doing character design, what's cool about it is that you kind of like the first 3 or 4 drawings are gonna be algorithmic. It's like what you're comfortable with. It's like what you think everyone's gonna like. It's the kind of the expected solution. What's in your bag of tricks that you learn, and I realized those are the worst ones. Like, or you just have to flush them out. Like, okay, you go there, you just kind of flush it out. And then you go to a point where I was like, oh, I kind of like I did it by a mistake, but I kind of like this line next to this line, and then you go, okay, that's that's a thing to like hold on to, and then it's kind of like floral decoration. You got these 2 flowers, and somehow you put them right next to each other in the vase, and it worked, and then you're like, I don't want to go for the expected this thing that most people would put next to those 2 flowers. Why don't we throw this thing that's completely out of this other plant next to this? And then it's usually terrible, but then there's like something there because you put these 2 things next to this thing, and then now it's like a different, and it kind of throws you in this other path. And I think that's what I love about character design. It's like this constant floral decoration. And you have like what the function of the design should be, but I almost feel like I'm going to a point where it's like, you want to support the story, you want to support it has to fit with the director's vision, it has to have personality, it has to function for the story, but I think it can also live in its completely different space that is just this other thing, this other, what was it? Aesthetic, other ideas. It can live actually outside of the story. I used to think it was like this modernistic kind of thing where it's like form follows function, like this plus this equals this. So the process of elimination was just to basically, does it support the story or does it? But you realize, when you're working in the industry, it's like, well, that's your interpretation. Like, you have to. That's your interpretation of what the story is, and the story's gonna change. The director probably has a different view of what that story is, so that's like a constantly shifting target. But this other thing, that the reason why they're hiring you is like kind of putting your own flavor on
exactly.
The thing. And they're kind of using you to kind of figure out things that aren't expected.
Yeah, totally.
And like that space where it's like you're kind of going to the unknown and you're questioning, like, oh, I used to think this is what appeal was, and then you're constantly like psyching yourself out and going into a place where like you're breaking those, and it's like, okay, if I lose this line and this line, is it still appealing?
Yeah.
Can I put this thing in the mix and still make it appealing? Like, I like
totally
the discovery of tripping myself out in my own expectations and going somewhere really strange.
Yeah. Oh my god.
And usually that's what I'm showing in the director is like the first 3 or 4 is maybe me trying to hone in on what would be the expected answer, and then I usually leave a couple drawings like so that okay, I'm kind of really stretching it. It's kind of selling the story, but now it's doing this other thing.
Yeah. That's so many things you just said. There's so many branches of thoughts that like immediately after you said the sentence, it reminded me of this, but all together it was so relatable to me. Was like, the first pass is like the worst pass, right? And how many times have you been in that experience where it's like the director is like, okay, there aren't any drawings yet on this film. You're the fresh, you get to come in and you get to do the first drawings on this film. I'll see you next week, go. And then you come back the first week and you're like, okay, so I did do work this first week. I did do a lot of drawings. I don't like any of them, so I don't support any of these drawings. But here is everything that I did that doesn't work for the film. Here you go. Like, where it's just like, and oftentimes I think because, we're working in a team and we're working for, directors, like we want to just give them the right solution right off the bat. But so much of the creative process a lot of times is like figuring out all the wrong things first. And once you start placing, I did maybe this. Oh, no, never mind. That was wrong. Maybe this. Oh, no, never mind. That was wrong too. And until you have a ton of those. And once you have a ton of those, the negative space of that kind of leads you to the direction of like, oh, now slowly we're formulating where we want to go. And so it's like, I think one helpful thing one thing that would be helpful for creatives too is that when leadership like producers or directors sometimes can recognize that too as part of the creative process, is like, because a lot of times from the director's standpoint, and I think from the producer's standpoint, particularly to save money, to save the budget, they're just like, oh, we can only have you on for 3 days, go.
Because I mean, even to that point, I feel like because a lot of story artists get launched with no environment design. And on top of figuring out like all the shots and the acting and all the business that's going on, they have they usually have to come up with something like super quick.
On the spot.
And then so it's not like final, but it actually eventually becomes final. And
because it just kind of gets overlooked, right? Like, because a lot of times it's like, oh, okay, I guess that's what the desk looks like now.
But I'm like, well, what if, I mean, like for like location scouting, like live action, they have a script. They haven't put the actors in there, but they're going to these different locations. And I feel like that's a space where you can kind of explore, like, okay, the script says it's gonna be like shot in this warehouse, but then when you actually go location scouting and look at different warehouses, you realize they all have different energy,
world,
different space, energy, and there's newer ideas that you can kind of like. There's a little space for it to be flexible and explore.
There's truth there, as opposed to like what you. I mean, even just imagine like if you got a storyboard assignment and they're like, this scene takes place in a church and she's against like a stained glass window. Go. Then what would you do, right? Like you would just maybe Google like stained glass windows, like look at the most iconic ones and then just like draw that.
Right.
But if they gave you time to go to like a specific church and like look at their stained glass window, it would your mind would just be like,
right.
You'd be like, oh wow, like this is a design that I never thought of, and yeah, for sure.
And in some ways, I'm like, I mean, I guess it's part of a money thing, but I think there's a lot of like, I mean, you need to have a structure there, and that's what the script gives you.
Yeah.
But like how that's interpreted, there's just so many. I feel like there's so many other lanes to
explore.
Visually.
Yeah.
That sometimes gets kind of squashed just because of the timeline.
I know.
But it's like I always wish like they would bring environment designers before anything's boarded out, and then just let them explore the space and give them different constraints. And I just wonder if someone, as a story artist coming into it, and you see the environment, and then you read how it plays, then you go, oh wait, like this space, I could totally see the character move here. Like people move differently in different spaces too.
Yeah, there's certainly so much room to explore in terms of how we make animated films and the process, because now every studio, every film it just kind of goes through the same process because that's what we're familiar with. Right. But if we open up to new different types of pipelines, rearranging the process to fit that film, to bespoke to that film, then I really think there could be new types of films there too. And like another thing that what you said is making me think of is like, a lot of times as visual development artists or as designers, we forget that we're actually writers too. Not in a sense of like we're writing the screenplay or we're writing with words, but like we're adding meat onto the story. And with every, like going back to what you said about like, here's what the story is, here's your assignment, and then your instinct to be like, but what if we just push outside of that a little bit? And what if we open this window or like demolish this wall to the building? Whoa, look, there's a brand new landscape there. Right. Like, let's go there. Like, that is also kind of like, that's very much the story or the film development process. And you're adding a brand new limb or a brand new chunk of the story on top of that. And a lot of times I think we as designers can forget that. Yeah. Not we, maybe me, but like just as a visual development artist, it's like, no, think of the story and think of adding meat to the story and think of stretching the character. Like, what would she do in this situation and what would he do in that situation and stuff like that. Sorry guys, we had to interrupt the recording just a little bit, but we're back.
Well, I want to kind of ask the same question to you, Minkyu. What's on your mind, like when it comes to art? Like, are things that you recent revelations?
It's funny. This is the first time I'm trying to articulate this, so I might stumble a little bit, but like I'm in a kind of a stage in my artistic life where I feel like I'm kind of reevaluating a lot of my relationship to who I think my audience is, if that makes sense. Like, I was just thinking about this the other day, where it's like, in a way, if you're an artist or you're a director or you're a writer or any type of creative where your engagement is with a large group of people, where you put something out into the world and you don't know who's going to see it, in a way, those people become your like creative partners in a weird way, if that makes sense. They become like, in the simplest term, like your audience. And you know how like in I don't know if you follow any of this, but like in New Age spirituality, oftentimes that spills over to like what I call entrepreneurship spirituality. Like you see it all the times, like entrepreneur mottos. And when I look at that, basically I'm seeing like New Age spirituality, but in a very masculine lens, very material and action driven. But anyway, like in one of those, a common like truism that a lot of people in that space accept is like, look at the 5 closest people around you, or like your 5 closest friends around you, and you'll kind of see where you're at too, if that makes sense. Basically, like who you're surrounded by defines your identity. And I think that's true not just for friends, but for your audience too. Like the audience that you engage with define your identity, like whether it be just your real identity or your personal identity or your artistic identity or your persona that you put online or whatever. And I don't know if you've ever had this experience, but sometimes like when you start recognizing your autonomy, sometimes you grow out of friend groups. Have you ever had that? Maybe I feel like some people don't. Just like your individuality of like, the more I grow,
right.
I'm realizing here's the part of my surroundings that don't fit me, that no longer serve me, don't feel authentic to me, feel like is maybe weighing me down from my growth, that maybe I need to let go of.
That feels unhealthy.
Yeah, that might feel unhealthy.
No, I get that.
And ideally you can kind of recognize that and you can move on to your next stage of growth in this life,
Right.
And yeah, I don't know, maybe some listeners could relate to that experience of, and I think some listeners won't, and I think that's beautiful too, where it's like, I mean, even when you think about a lot of like industry artists too, you go to some studios and there are artists who have worked there for like 30 years and are just as content and happy and satisfied as they were 30 years ago. I think that's a beautiful thing. That's so cool, and I really envy that. But recognizing that that's not who I am, and so what does that mean for me, for my artistic growth? Where there comes a moment where, like, if maybe these themes of dissatisfaction are popping up in your artistic life, then you start looking at like, okay, you start questioning it and you start wondering, okay, where is this coming from? And what do I need to do to address this? And I just felt like, that's a thing too, where it's like when you're defining yourself by who you think your audience is, that can in a way inhibit your artistic growth. And I'd be really curious to hear from our listeners about that, if anyone relates to that or anyone doesn't relate to that, or but I don't know, it's just been in my mind
politics
a lot.
Too.
Oh yeah, it goes into politics. That's the other thing that I've been kind of coming to realize these days is like, because online especially, and people shouldn't mind this, but you can't help but like sometimes think about it, is like when people are like on Facebook, you'll see like, oh, why do these actresses have to like give political speeches as their like thank you speeches as the Oscars or something? Like, I didn't watch the Oscars for politics, I watch it for fun, or like I watched it for entertainment. Like, keep entertainment and politics separate. And
right.
You read something like that and you start thinking about it, and it's like, really? But then just recently I read like this article about this contemporary modern kind of middle period artist named Donald Judd, who's one of my favorite artists. And it was this article that just kind of like was summarizing some of the best advices he gave. And one of them was like, no, be political with your art. And this is someone that I look up to so much, and I was just thinking like, everyone that I really, really respect all say that. And then everyone on Facebook who don't care that much about art are the people saying like, keep entertainment and politics separate. And I'm like, why am I listening to these? Why am I even considering the thoughts of these people that in my artistic life I just wouldn't take any advice from,
right.
As opposed to all these amazing artists who just had like an incredibly pure worldview when it comes to their art are saying another thing. And so that was like a mini micro revelation.
Do you think it's changed now since like with social media and just like with iPhones and
yeah, I think
like,
because that opens up a lot more fluidity of influences in your life, because you just never know who's going to follow you and send you that message.
right.
In a way, it kind of strengthens you where, for example, before we had that much online interaction with strangers, like when you're at art school, you're dealing with face-to-face your friends who are maybe, because, think about like how many heated discussions you have while you're at art school, right? Like, and in a way that's really helpful and that helps you grow. But at the same time, because they're real and they're your friends and they're real people, those comments or that feedback really matter to you. But once you go online and it's just like strangers throwing these comments at you, you're kind of like, oh,
Right.
these don't matter. Like,
Yeah.
you just do whatever you want. Just and it like strengthens your artistic core.
Right.
It's like core exercise. It's like Pilates for artists. Like, you just become more like, no, like suddenly your worldview widens and you're like, oh, I don't have to listen to some stranger with like no profile picture and 3 followers.
Right.
What they're like, I don't even know who this person is, what this person is saying. Like, why? Yeah. Like,
I mean, in some ways, I feel like being an artist is being comfortable with being alone too.
yeah.
And just like, maybe there isn't an audience for the work that you're doing, and so sometimes, like, I think about like guys like Mango, like nobody really.
Yeah. Now we're all his audience. The whole world became his audience.
Right.
One of the most iconic painters. Yeah.
And he still was driven to do the work that he was doing, and I was like, in some ways, like maybe it's like being an artist is being comfortable with the fact that sometimes you might be the only person that might be thinking the way that you're like. There might not be that audience yet, or.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no,
know,
totally. Yeah, no, I think that totally makes sense. And it's like knowing your priorities.
Right.
And if there are red flags in your inner artistic life that are raising up, like examining them and reevaluating your priorities and constantly, like I've always been the type of artist that wants to always grow out of the stage I was in before. In a way. And so, and even right now, like my biggest artistic influences like are becoming like more obscure or less shared by like our immediate animation community.
Right.
And it's like when that natural pull kind of happens, it's like you kind of want to go there. And I think it's your responsibility as an artist to at least investigate it. And I feel like I'm kind of in that space right now where I'm, kind of like, oh, what's this about? And being brave and confident enough to be like, no, I want to go there. Like, I don't care. Like, I want to let go of the things that I need to let go of and embrace the new things coming in my life. And it's funny, like, I feel like that's always been my hope for the animation industry, too, in the U.S., because one of the things that I always constantly think about for especially American animation is like, it's common knowledge that like, okay, for an American animated film to have high quality, it needs a big budget. I mean, I'm not necessarily saying that this is true, but it's like the common knowledge, right? Like it's where it's like, oh, if you want full animation, you need a big budget. You want good effects, you want a big budget. What dictates a big budget? Like how big the audience is going to be, right? And so
The algorithm,
yeah, but also like then, because then the film becomes tethered to trying to get the largest audience possible to get, that big budget. And in everyone's minds, the largest audience is going to be children and families, right? Meaning that the film is going to have to be rated G or PG. Never PG-13, because that means, we're going to lose the children audience. that's how American animation is. But when you look at like Japan or anywhere else in the world, I've never lived in Europe, so I'd be really curious to hear from our European listeners, or I mean, not even just Europe, but anywhere else in the world, how animation is viewed in your society or your community. Please, if you have any thoughts about that, any things you want to illuminate us about, like please write us. But like, I just keep thinking about how, like, you know, a film like Your Name in Japan or in China did massively well, which, you know, in my mind, I would categorize that as more of like a young adult film. But that kind of film just can't do well in America,
right?
You know, and it's like, and part of it is the culture, right? I mean, you even see it, like, if you go to Japan, like, and you go on a subway, what do you see? You see like 40-year-old like salarymen reading manga. Right. You know, it's just like in that culture, manga or animation is just more of this medium where it's like, yeah, any story can be told in that. And the general public, just the mass general audience understands that. And they're used to experiencing stories that way. And so when a film like Your Name comes out, like even in China, like I think I read on Cartoon Brew that like it beat Moana, like in terms of its numbers. But why does it almost feel like in America is the only place where animation is like jailed in that like child family area, and in America we just don't have that culture of like 40-something-year-olds, or even like, honestly, my wish is just like even like teenagers or like 20-something-year-olds like taking animation as seriously as they would, you know, like a live action Lord of the Rings movie or whatever, but like an Avengers, you know. That's always on my mind, and I was like, what needs to change in American society for animation to finally not be more pigeonholed as a quote unquote genre and really thrive and spread its wings as the medium that it's always meant to be. And it's like there's so much work to be done there.
Right. Well, it seems like it seems like you're talking about the audience's appetite.
Yeah, the audience's appetite, the expectation, and how all the films that the American animation industry has created so far are in a way socially conditioning the audience, culturally conditioning the audience to be, this is the only type of this is the only type of story.
This is all done on purpose, Mingy. You don't know.
I don't know.
You haven't seen Network? We're being designed to be sheep. We don't want to.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys. Like, I don't want to make this a conspiratorial thing. But we can go deep there, too.
Welcome to the Minkyu and Shiyoun Conspiracy Podcast. No, but
there is a reason for that, Minkyu. We're designed to be sheep. Just focus on what's around us.
Yeah.
And never look outside.
Okay, but like, why can't we be sheep like other country sheep? Like, they seem a little bit more woke.
Self-aware?
Sheep. Yeah. Like, I don't know. But, yeah, so it's just always on my mind because, you know, someone tweeted this to me not the other day, a while ago, but it was just, I think there must have been like a thread or a discussion going on like, oh, I remember what it was. It was like, you know, that women in animation, when the statistics came out, that really like impacted me. I mean, I always knew it was that bad, but just seeing it in numbers, I was like, oh, damn. Yeah. I don't know. But when I saw those numbers, I just felt like I could see the implications it had on storytelling as well. Because I think, and then once I started like sharing some of my thoughts on that, where it's like, you know, those are just numbers, but there are a lot of like indirect pressures too, I think, in the animation industry for women creators to create things that are more appetizing to boys as well. I don't know if I worded that the best, but it's like one of the things that I see a lot is like if a woman creator might have like an animated TV show idea, a lot of executives will be like, well, how will boys enjoy this? You know, like how will boys like this?
this is uninformed, but thought, but I heard some weird statistic that maybe girls don't watch animation at a certain age.
Yes, and that's what that one of the Twitter users were saying too, is like they were pitching the show to like this animation executive, and the animation executive said something like, oh yeah, girls tend to age out of animation way earlier than boys. Right. Like girls, when they hit like 8 or 10, they stop watching animation. And I've heard that many times too. Like I've heard that
very algorithmic.
And it's like at the same time, we can't completely blame the executives in terms of that statistic, because they're just looking at the data and they're just like telling us like, here's the data.
Right.
You know? And so it's like, if there's truth to that, instead of just saying like, no, you're wrong, there's no truth to that, it's like, okay, what's behind the truth of that and how do we fix it?
Right. I mean, maybe the studio is like make an informed gamble. It's like they're going to the blackjack, or they're playing what's the one where you put the money on the number and it spins the ball. Roulette. Yeah. I mean, and then there's a guy.
Studios will love that.
And so there's a guy right next to you, and he's a mathematician, and he's giving you all the data of all the other games, and statistically, you want to put your money on these couple numbers.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like some weird science thing where you're trying, because I mean, ultimately, maybe because it's a business.
Yeah, of course.
Like,
in a capitalist society, that's why capitalism and art are incompatible.
But maybe it's I guess it's just about getting money.
Maybe, but I don't know. I also wonder if it's just about like just having those conversations and, you know, encouraging those conversations just in society too, because it's like, I mean, the other thing that comes to mind is like everyone complains about sequels, like, oh, it's another sequel, it's another franchise, there's no original stuff out there. But it's like, well, guess what? Everyone's just watching the sequels, you know, like where it's like, yeah, we can always blame the executives or the studio, but they're
just responding to the
they're almost just like a mindless machine. They're just gonna look at, okay, where's the money, where are the numbers, and they're just gonna almost just respond to that, right? As opposed to like, I mean, in an ideal world, of course, there's that like shining armor, a shining hero studio that's just like, no, we're just gonna make things that are full of artistic integrity, instead of like watering it down to like, there's a way.
That makes me think, like, you know, Netflix, they have all this data on our viewing habits, and I wonder what that, because they don't share any of that.
Yeah, they're very cagey.
Another conspiracy thing. Even though I work there, I mean, we both work there. Do
you like conspiracy theories?
We actually both work at Netflix.
Yeah.
But I was like, oh, it'd be interesting to see that data and what that says, because
it'll be interesting to see how, like, now that Apple Plus and Disney Plus is coming on, like, will just data sharing be more accessible? Will it be more cagey? Now that will that mean there's more communication and dialogue between?
Right.
Or will people be more aware of those things? Yeah.
Because I mean, I wonder if it's coming from this group of people that are analyzing the data and then framing it in a certain way to the studios. So my sister's a doctor, and she goes to these, like, it's kind of like Comic-Con for doctors. Except it's not comics. It's like it's about medicine and that.
It's a conference that where like life actually matters.
Right. Yeah. It's like important stuff.
Yeah.
And she was even telling me that, like, you can get the same set of data, and even based on the political angle of the person that's framing the data, they can frame it in a completely different way.
Of course.
To support one way or another.
Yeah.
And I just wonder, it's like, well, okay. Another uninformed opinion. Like, as an executive, like, you're basically a gatekeeper, and you have, like, the money that the studio has, and you're investing it in these different ideas. and basically you're making an informed gamble. Like, okay, well, that's, statistically that would be a big hit, so I would give a little bit more money to that. Sorry, in a really stupid way. And then you're getting that data from someplace, right? Some kind of statistician is giving you this data that, like, oh, girls don't watch these kind of things, animation at this point.
Above 10-year-old, yeah.
Above 10-year-olds.
Yeah.
So then all this decision is based on that data set, and it just made me well, you're basically saying maybe the data's true, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, because
because
I'm saying sometimes we can't just like put the blame on the data, and
right.
maybe
because it's a mirror for
yeah, it's just reflecting back what society is sometimes, and I think, instead of just solely looking to the studio to fix all the problems, like, in a way the studios are just gonna be like mindless, like, money guzzling machines, right? Like they're more of like a program rather than like an actual.
Well, like, I just feel like, well, they're running on a very populist kind of agenda,
right,
of like
on capitalism,
like a capitalist. But it makes me think, like, well, like, really important. I mean, there's still a lot of really important people in history that, like, did a lot of important things that were, like, yeah, maybe generally the population was feeling this way, but there's like a Martin Luther King or a Malcolm X, or there's these people that are just like, they kind of go above and beyond, and they push a different type of story that pushes a new, and I guess that's the trick, is like how to, like, in a way, make these films kind of like things that are aspirational. It's a common, like we're not, it's almost like we're trying to, almost the studios are trying to find the lowest common denominator.
Always.
Or what's the common denominator. And I wonder if it's about maybe like kind of investing in these films that are kind of a long shot a little bit, that is outside of the data. That
oh, for sure. I think the studios definitely have a responsibility to play as well, and that's my hope for a lot of these newer studios popping up, is that, and that's my long-term dream as well. That's like my big life dream, is to create a studio like that, to really push forward groundbreaking, out of the box animated films. But it's like, right now I'm just like a measly little employee. And also it's like, how much responsibility does the society have? I mean, it's almost like thinking of, going back to what you said about politics, like thinking of studios as simply politicians. Sometimes you just can't look at the politician and just like look at them and be like, here's everything that's wrong, fix all our problems, when they have all these constituents, or like their whole voting demo, or like their,
demographic
that they're beholden to. It's like, what's a grassroots campaign, right? It's actually the people kind of saying, we want this, and then so once the people say something, that's when the politicians are going to be affected, and that's when they're going to change. Illuminati. You can't look at politicians to
basically
be leaders.
Illuminati, Minkyu.
Oh boy.
Oh boy. Just kidding.
Okay,
but
we're yeah. Yeah. I don't know where to go.
Sorry.
That's okay.
I just like to just throw you off.
No, that's great. But yeah, I don't know. That's kind of where my mind is at these days. And I mean, obviously, it's something that I'm always thinking about, but it's definitely informing me as an artist and where I want to go, and just what I want to explore is.
I mean, it seems
being
like
an animation artist.
It's not completely bleak too. I think there's a lot of new things that are happening. People that are being aware of that. So I don't think it's like, I think there are people and things that are happening.
And I would be really, I would really love to hear from our listeners about this too. Like, how do you guys feel? Are you guys just satisfied with the type of animated movies that are being made right now, that everything has to be G or PG, like
right, and the types of stories.
Do you guys like that? Do you guys like that every character has to somehow fit into like a Happy Meal mold, right, and you can see them as a toy? I don't know.
Even the feeling of like, well, even if these films get a big budget and they get a lot of marketing, like, is it maybe just with the American audience that those type of films, even with that, they wouldn't make?
Yeah, no, that's my what I'm kind of saying. That's what I kind of feel like, at least. Like, what is it about our American culture and our American entertainment culture specifically? Like, what is it about that that's molding the audience to be this certain way? I don't know. I'm so ignorant about other. I'm gonna carry on with what I was gonna say. I'm so ignorant about other countries. Like, I don't know how it is, in different. Yeah. Well, okay, yeah. Share those secrets. What are those secrets? He just called you out.
Oh, okay. So, have you guys seen Network?
I haven't seen Network.
Oh, you gotta watch that.
To say. Yeah, I want to see it. Yeah.
We could do a whole episode. Let me do a little bit more research.
Maybe I'll watch Network.
Open my big
later,
mouth,
and then we can actually have a conversation after I've watched Network. But no, I don't know what it's about, but like, I don't question what you're about to say. I'm sure it's really informed, and there's a lot of truth to what you were about to just say. But I don't know, just thoughts in my head.
That's interesting. Yeah.
I just want
themes
animation
or
to
messages emerging around you.
That was pretty much it. I just want animation to go to a new place. Yeah, and right. we always talk so much about, like, animation's not a genre, it's a medium, but I feel like it's just not being reflected.
Right.
Like, we're not putting the money where our mouth is. I don't know.
You need, like, printed pictures for animation specifically.
Yeah, I don't know.
Sorry, this is depressing.
Yeah, but one of the things that I wanted to say too is, like, so recently, I wanted to mention, like, some of the stuff that I watched recently, and like, and I binged this Amazon show called Forever. And I'm really sad because, like, apparently there's not going to be a season 2. So, like, right after I binged it, I was like, is there going to be season 2? And they're like, no, like, long ago, there was never going to be season 2. But it was so good. It's this kind of, like, dramedy, I guess. I would, like, almost, like, teetering on art house comedy starring Maya Rudolph and Fred Armisen. And I can't give away the premise because, like, you just have to watch the first episode, and I don't want to give away the twist, and then you have to watch the second episode, and there's another twist there, and I can't give that away. But basically what that show asks you about a lot is, like, we do really have a very limited time in our life, and so much of our time we just kind of spend mindlessly doing the same routine things. But if you knew that you had this finite time, wouldn't you kind of want to do whatever you wanted?
Right.
Isn't there also, like, value in just kind of like, no, I'm gonna take charge of my life and, like, really go out there and explore and, like, do things no one's ever done, Like, I don't know. No. It was...
Nobody's into those type of themes.
I guess not. Yeah.
Stories.
But
no, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
But it was good. That sounds like a great.
Yeah, it was really, really good, and it was so well directed and, like, so well acted and well edited, and
it made me think a little bit about education too, because I always feel like
totally,
because I mean, right now there's like a lack of funding for the arts. Yeah. And how important that is for, like, education for children. But, like, I wonder if more schools had, like, kind of art appreciation classes or film appreciation classes. Yeah. Like, and you instill that as something that's important. Yeah. Just as a citizen of the world. Yeah, to not only know what's right and wrong, but
Yeah.
also have good taste too.
Yeah.
Like, that's like
I think
kinda
that's
goes
so
with it.
true. And I think that's so true. And I also think it's true not just for like school education, but even home education and what the kind of parents' responsibility to educate their own kids in art.
Right.
Like that reminds me of like, I mean, even think about like the popularity of Star Wars, right?
Right.
Like how many families is this happening where like the father was a huge Star Wars fan, and for the lack of a better word, and I'm gonna say this word, I don't mean it in a negative context, but are brainwashing their kids to love Star Wars as well. And I don't mean that in a bad way, because
Right.
like I think that's really great. I actually think that's really beautiful, and I'm really moved when you see those YouTube videos of like a father watching Star Wars
With their kids.
with their kid who's never seen it, and it's almost like that dad gets to experience Star Wars all over again.
Right, right,
That's so incredible.
right.
And just, I think experiences like that really shape the taste of that child, the artistic taste of that child. And when you look at Star Wars, like that's not necessarily a family film. You know what I mean? Like there are so many things that happen in those series where it's like, yeah, this is not like this would never pass as like a typical
I guess
wide release animated film, but what is it? It's the biggest franchise in the world. And like I think that's what's important is like more and more, I think not just parents, but everyone should be more expressive about like art that they appreciate. That's not just the mainstream stuff.
Right.
Or
it's brainwashing them in a different way.
yeah,
No,
I
just
hate
kidding.
that. I don't. Again, like I don't. Brainwashing isn't the right term that I'm
Right,
trying to
right.
use here. Like it's
sharing. They're
yeah,
sharing your
sharing. It's the term that I'm using, trying to think of is like somewhere in between educating, brainwashing,
and sharing.
sharing, sharing the joy of the experience.
Right.
Experiencing, it's somewhere all of that. But what I'm saying is like those experiences become so fundamental
Right.
in shaping artistically what that child likes or doesn't like. You know what I
Right.
mean? And it's like, is that what needs to happen? Where
I almost feel like that could. I'm not half-ass thought.
yes, yeah,
But I was like, oh, maybe that's where it can start. It's like with the children, how they.
I really think so.
If we educate them in a way that makes them the most successful in all the different ways, like maybe we could grow that audience that you're talking about that would spend money on a film that is different and is aspirational and they would actually enjoy it because
Yeah.
they've known from when they were young
Yeah.
that those films have value.
Yeah,
And
for
there's
sure. Yeah, and it's just like when you think of like how parents treat their kids to animated movies these days, it's just like, oh, it's just whatever the kids wants to see. Oh, they
Right.
just want to see Minions, fine. Just take them to Minions. Like just
Right.
I mean, no shade to Minions, but you know what I mean. Like, but instead being like, no. Like, see, this is a cool thing.
Right.
You should watch this and let's experience it together and let me show you
Right.
how like there's so much cool stuff in here and let me show you how you can look for those things. And
I mean, it goes to that point that there's aesthetics in everything. Like,
oh yeah,
there's like, it's not like you could stretch that into everything that you're doing.
yeah,
Like, from the type of food that you eat, the
oh for sure,
movies
yeah.
that you watch, the things that these things that you surround yourself, the books that you read. Like,
Yeah,
it makes me think more and more that like maybe it's like, I mean, it's a long-term investment, but like I really think teachers and what they do is so important because they really have that responsibility of that next generation.
totally.
And like the types of things that they would want to buy, things that they like. It's not like they're brainwashing them, but
Yeah,
you're just sharing, hey,
you're opening up new worlds for them.
There's not just a hamburger and a cheeseburger. There's sushi, and there's lots of different gradients of sushi. There's bad sushi, and there's good sushi. There's kind of obscure. There's kind of things that eclectic types of sushi, and like it's kind of maybe that palette of like, hey, like it's not just this good or bad, or it's not just binary thing that it's.
Yeah, it's not just like the world isn't just your comfort zone,
right?
And you shrouding yourself in your comfort zone. The world is actually new things beyond your wildest imaginations that help you grow and help widen your perspective. And
so me and Mingyu are going to be making a school for
what? No. Just to clarify, we have never talked about this. Like that was a joke. Okay, so for the last bit of this podcast, we want to answer some listener questions. Just skimming through this, I just want to mention a couple things too. We have a question here about art school versus alternative routes. That's a really, really big topic, and that's okay, Cooper. Hi. Cooper is very opinionated on this too.
And he's going to choke Cooper right now.
No.
You guys can't see it, but he's grabbing it, and that's fine.
No, Donna, he's not. But we actually want to actually give this topic the due time that it deserves. Right. So we want to explore it through many episodes. Stay tuned for more episodes actually diving into the whole art school versus alternative route debate that includes if alternative routes is the only thing that I can afford, how can I plan what's my trajectory into the animation industry? That's one thing. There's another question here about style. That's a huge topic that I feel like we can dedicate several episodes to. So that's probably coming in the future, right, Shiyoun?
Yep.
Yeah. So stay tuned for that. We're going to maybe just focus on this question for this episode, where we feel like it kind of fits in with some of the themes that we were talking about. Do you want to read the question?
Yeah. So the question is from Larry McDougall. And so his question is, when you go to work for one of the big studios, is there a dominating culture that you have to fit into? Does everyone agree on what the best movies, artists, comics, etc. are? Do you have to keep your opinions to yourself to fit in? How open to new or different ideas are they?
Now, this is a very interesting question too, and we were talking about a micro phenomenon of this last night when we were having our meeting, where I think we were talking about how, like, even just comparing DreamWorks, Pixar, and Disney, when you launch or issue a scene to a storyboard artist or an animator. So for listeners who might not know what that is basically the director is handing off an animated scene or a sequence or a script, a sequence from a script for the storyboard artist or the animator to animate or storyboard, and they're giving them directions for it.
Right.
DreamWorks, Pixar, and Disney all use a different term. I think Disney, we used to use the term issuing, right? DreamWorks, I think they say launching.
Right.
And I think, is it Pixar that says handoff?
Yep.
Feel free to correct us on Twitter or Instagram or email if I did that wrong. But even just that is kind of like a little microcosm of like the different cultures, like the fact that they use like different languages for different terms for like the pipeline.
Yeah,
I just thought it was really interesting.
Yeah, everyone's doing animation, but it's like they're using slightly different words.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I do think, to answer Larry's question, even if it's not explicit or implicit or purposeful, there does tend to be a dominating culture, and that culture is made up of like who just happens to be there at that studio. Like it seems like you can't help but.
Like at Disney, it used to be John Lasseter, and so I mean that was the dominating culture in a way. That was. I mean,
same as Pixar too, right?
I mean, it was basically Pixar, Disney. It was pretty much. I mean, there were different studios, and they slightly have different cultures, but I would say it's really top down. The culture really comes from the leadership that drives the studios, and at Netflix, it's a completely different like. culture there too, and the things that they aim for are different.
Yeah.
Like how they make money and the types of films that they like to push forward and the types of leadership and the personalities.
Yeah.
I mean, I realize it's just very different. Like, I've only worked at Disney, Sony, and now at Netflix, but I could even say, like, all those things have a big effect on that culture. But
yeah, and totally, and to answer the rest of Larry's questions of, like, does everyone agree on what the best movies are? Do you have to keep your opinions to yourself to fit in? My answer to that would be, I hope you don't.
right.
Whoever listens to this, like, wherever you end up, there might be peer pressure and cliques, and where honestly I do think I have seen that a lot, where it's like, everyone's gonna find the common ground in the movies that they like, and yes, there are certain films or TV shows that are always going to get referenced all the time because everyone's seen it. But my hope is that whoever listens to this, like, whichever studio you end up with, you let your freak flag shine.
Right.
in terms of artistic taste, not in terms of actual freakiness, but freakiness in a bad sense, I guess. But, like, freakiness in a good sense, where
You should speak from your own truth.
Yeah,
I mean, I mean, it's kind of like, I'm like, I guess I was more affected by that when I was in my 20s, but at a certain point, I'm like, okay, I'm tired of, like,
it's
not
handy, leave it. Yeah.
not saying how I really feel. Like, and it actually, there's a weight to that of, like, not saying that for a long time.
Yeah,
and then you
peer
going,
pressure. Yeah.
Peer pressuring to feel like you have to say, like, oh, that looks good, or that's great, oh, I'm okay. Like,
yeah.
I think there's something
Kind of oppressive about it.
Yeah. And I feel like, I mean, you shouldn't be.
If I was in a leadership
asshole,
position, I would think I would probably appreciate, kind of the more outlier perspectives too. Like, it's this weird thing where we're always trying to make something new,
Right.
but if our influences are all just the same, like, how are we going to make something new?
Yeah, no, totally. So I mean, I think it's, even if they aren't open to new ideas, it's like maybe you're with the wrong crowd of people. I have to say, at a certain point, you have to be like, you have to kind of be like, judge, like, who you're having a conversation with.
Yeah.
And really, is it worth your time to like change your opinion?
Yeah.
And you can kind of tell just right off the bat, like, what type of people you're surrounding yourself in.
Yeah.
And if they're the type of people that aren't open to new or different ideas, they're not open to.
Then you have to kind of ask yourself, are they kind of stunting your own growth?
Yeah, maybe they're not healthy for you.
Yeah.
It's just,
yeah.
So to me, I feel like it's just like kind of being self-aware of that. Of just like, is this the group I want to, like, is this a fun group? They don't sound very
Is this
fun.
group mentally healthy for me? Yeah, no. And I feel like, when you're young, I mean, I think it's a lesson and a challenge that we're always grappling with, and we're constantly reevaluating and growing in that area. But especially when you're young and you just joined a studio, it is so easy to just succumb to it, right? Because you're new and you're so excited and you just want to fit in, and so you just lend yourself to it. And maybe that's just what you have to go through when you're young. I don't know. I certainly went through that, but I think those experiences now helped me be who I am today, where I'm like, oh, now I'm much more aware of those influences and energetically what that does to me.
Right.
And how that influences my creativity and the ideas that I come up with. Like, I mean, even when I think of myself now at a studio compared to how I was at art school, wildly different in terms of my creativity, how the type of ideas that I come up with, where those ideas stem from, like how much I edit myself.
Kind of the fun of going, like, we kind of talked about it too before, is that, like, the fun of being in a studio environment is to be around different artists that think different from you.
Yeah.
And
That's
like,
the best case scenario. Yeah.
It's just like, well, like, yeah, I didn't know about that artist, but who is that?
Yeah.
Can you let me know? Or like, oh, I didn't know about that movie. Maybe I'll watch it later on. I mean, maybe it's because I surround myself with people that are really nice and cool, but I never got the feeling personally for me that they're not open to new or different ideas, or that they in some way were oppressive, and I just feel like it's really about, I guess, maybe the people that you're surrounding yourself with, and
totally.
Hopefully it's a group. Most artists in general that I've known, I mean, they've been pretty open. Usually when they're like, oh, have you heard about this artist? They're like, oh, really? Who's that? Okay, cool. Yeah. They're not like, oh my gosh, you like that artist? That guy sucks.
Yeah, no one. Yeah. Hopefully you're not around anyone like that. Yeah.
I heard anyone.
But yeah, I guess we have to wrap up, and that's our time.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for listening.
We have a lot more, hopefully interesting stuff coming, so stay tuned.
It'll get more spicy. It'll get more conspiratorial. Break It Down is coming, guys.
And don't forget to, if you have any comments that you want to add, anything you want to say, any perspectives that you want to offer, any topics that you want us to discuss, don't forget to write in and email us. And you can find that the email address on our Instagram, our Twitter, on our YouTube page as well. So thanks so much for listening. Thank you so much for sticking with us this far. We'll get better, we promise.
Thanks to Andy and
Thank
Donna
so
for
much.
letting us use their
Yes,
their
thank you so
space.
much, Andy, Donna. Thank you.
Thanks to my wife, Jihyun.
Thank you, Jihyun.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
See ya.